everyone, and welcome back to Cartoon Universe. If you've been keeping up with Western animation for the past 15 years or so, then you may already be familiar with one of the most groundbreaking and influential cartoons to have come out since, a long time ago. Avatar: The Last Airbender. More recently, though, you may have heard that there's a brand new live-action adaptation coming out to Netflix. To adapt a story like this is no small task, but can they pull it off? Should they even try? There's a few reasons that point to those answers being yes in my opinion, but let's discuss it. I highly recommend you go watch it. They finally put it back on Netflix after so many years of waiting. You've been warned. On the surface, Avatar is a pretty simple concept. The world is divided into 4 basic elements: water, earth, fire, and air. Long ago, the 4 nations lived together in harmony. Then everything changed when the Fire Nation blah blah blah. Aang is basically a Dalai Lama reincarnation who needs to master all 4 elements and bring balance to the world, and he needs to stop Fire Lord Mark Hamill from taking over the world before summer when the Fire Nation will be at its most powerful. Basic stuff, really. What makes this series stand out so much is not an easy thing to discuss in one short video, but I'll try my best. The world that this story takes place in is a great starting point. The level of detail found in this world could rival the likes of Harry Potter, Star Wars, maybe even Lord of the Rings. By drawing real-world elements from Asian mythology, martial arts, and architecture, and doing all this in such a respectful way, co-creators Brian Konietzko and Michael DiMartino were able to create a very grounded world with people you could potentially see in real life. What starts out as a very basic black and white moral center at the start of this series slowly develops into one where the nations we're meant to follow also have major drawbacks, such as blatant sexism from the Northern Water Tribe, or how the Earth Nation is outright brainwashing their citizens into believing
there's no war in Ba Sing Se.
Not even the Fire Nation is treated as black and white. There are good, caring people found within the Fire Nation, with some being treated by their own nation as poorly as the outsiders. But more to that point, the characters themselves aren't treated as morally black and white, which is pretty novel for children's cartoons at the time. Aang is a sweet and caring kid, but he's only 12 and has to accept that his entire people were wiped off the face of the earth while he was frozen in a block of ice, because he ran away from his obligation that was forced on him when he was too young.
My people needed me and I wasn't there to help. The world needed me and I wasn't there to help.
Zuko, on the other hand, is the main antagonist for most of the series, but he deals with immense trauma at the hands of his father and feels the only way he can reclaim his honor, or more accurately, his father's acceptance, is to capture Aang.
I meant you no disrespect. I am your loyal son.
You will learn respect, and suffering will be your teacher.
I could go on for hours, but this video isn't about that. Today we are talking about a certain live-action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Not that one. There we go, much better. Hopefully. It's understandable why there would be so many people interested in this upcoming live-action adaptation. But just as there are reasons to be excited over it, there are plenty of reasons to be concerned. I have mixed feelings, to say the least, but instead of stewing in my ink over it, I've decided to be a little more productive and discuss the good, as well as the bad, that could come out of this series. We don't really need to ask what makes for a bad adaptation, considering we already have the movie to compare our future series to. But in general, why do adaptations and remakes fail more than they succeed? Adaptations often fail because either the material itself wasn't translated well from one medium to another, such as a book being turned into a movie or a television series being turned into a movie, or because the material itself works well for one medium while it would fail for the other. For instance, I could not imagine a movie adaptation of the book House of Leaves, and that is due to how integral being a book is to the very story behind the novel. And just look at these pages, man. How are you going to translate this into a movie? Remakes, on the other hand, are a bit more complicated, but they often fail due to being unnecessary, they change too much, they change too little, the original creators aren't involved, or what they're adding isn't that good to begin with. Now, while I currently consider this new series to be more of an adaptation rather than a full remake, I'll go into detail later as to why I bring them up. What does any of this mean for the Netflix series? We know that Brian and Michael will be returning to reprise their roles as executive producers, and when interviewed, the voice actress for Toph, Jessie Flower, stated that the two were much more involved with this live-action adaptation. Brian and Michael have both openly stated their woes of having little to no input in the Shyamalan movie, and it shows. So to see that the two have much more power this time around certainly paints the new series in a better light, at least in my opinion. You know, as odd as it sounds, I think the movie can serve as a blessing in disguise. True, the movie failed so much on just about everything that made the original series so special, but now we've seen the worst the franchise has to offer. Lord, I have seen the light, and it can only go uphill from here. Regardless of whether the new series lives up to the old, we'll probably be able to at least say it's not as bad as... Jokes aside, seeing the movie flop and understanding why makes it more clear what the most important aspects of Avatar are. It's the highly choreographed fights that have emotional weight or plot progression. It's the deep layers of world building and the real stakes that threaten the world. It's the fact that Sokka is actually funny and endearing.
Okay? Everybody can help us now!
This is pathetic! My jokes are way funnier than this!
Seriously, why does a live-action movie feel more like a cartoon than the actual cartoon? A series on Netflix also comes with the opportunity to... I don't want to say be darker, because the show gets pretty dark in its own right, but the show might have the opportunity to touch on subjects that could only be hinted at in the original series. They wouldn't have to tiptoe around the concept of killing off characters, and they could tackle the subject of Ursa's abuse at the hands of Fire Lord Ozai, which was only touched on in the graphic novels. Doing so also runs the risk of getting too dark just because you now have the freedom to do so. If you don't know, one of the reasons why they went with bending in the first place is because that would keep them from having to throw punches at each other. They wouldn't have to rely quite as much on the bending being used to sort of self-censor physical hand-to-hand combat found in martial arts, thus being allowed to actually punch someone in the face. But with that freedom comes the risk that you'd go too far and lose the audience in the process. Of course, I'm not saying that they should get rid of the bending, but they would be able to actually throw punches. I think the biggest reason this adaptation could be a good thing is frankly the reason I have most personal beef with. The fact that there are people out there who are unwilling to even try a cartoon because it's for kids, and thus means it's bad or it can't possibly have the depth of something live action. That's BS for so many reasons, but it's sadly a real stigma that still exists. So, personal talk for a second. One of the happiest memories I have is when my mom, when my mom began to watch The Last Airbender with me. She came in pretty late when I was watching Appa alone. At first she was kind of poking fun at it because she didn't really understand Appa or the emotional attachment that I had. But she finished the episode with me and we watched the next. And the next. Until we finished the series. It meant so much to me that my mom would take interest in something that I was so passionate about, even for a little while. My dad, on the other hand, hey Dad, no matter what my mom tried to say about the series, refused to watch it. I know that if he started to watch it, he would likely enjoy it, but he has a bias against animation and probably will never let that go. It shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter that it's animated. The fact that, again, the live-action movie was more cartoony than the actual cartoon is proof of that. But it's still true that this Netflix series may do a lot to revitalize the franchise. More eyes will be drawn to it because it's not animated, and more people will be able to see just how good the series is. Maybe they'll be so impressed that they finally give the original a try, and we can only hope. Earlier I mentioned remakes, despite considering this to be more of a general adaptation. Well, why is that? Well, I think if the show really wants to succeed, they need to do more than just a straight-up adaptation. Many of us have already seen the story, and we know how it plays out. And the original already does an amazing job in all fields. If this new series wants to stand out on its own, it needs to do more than just rehash the old. It needs to make something new. You can't just adapt a series episode by episode because that would be boring and predictable. Of course, you need to retain the very basic plot of the story. Aang should still be the Avatar, and he should master all 4 elements to try and stop the Fire Lord before Summer's End. That's not to say I would want them to completely remake the show from the ground up with no previous episodes being revisited. In fact, the live-action series could do some good by fixing those not-so-good episodes from the cartoon rather than nixing them all together. The Great Divide is, of course, what I and many Avatar fans immediately think of when it comes to less than stellar episodes. The episode was kind of boring and meandering, had little to nothing to do with the ongoing story, and had both Aang and Katara acting incredibly out of character, in my opinion. As someone who's as much of a screwball as Aang can be at the start of the series, he's someone who's lost a huge chunk of his culture, as is Katara, due to the raids of the Southern Water Tribe. I, for the life of me, cannot see these characters, even in Book 1, thinking it's okay to just lie about someone's culture and history just to get them to stop fighting. Especially if you look at the graphic novels, you can see how furious post-war Katara gets at the idea of the Northern Water Tribes coming in to change aspects about her culture. So it just seems a bit hypocritical that all we get from her after Aang's reveal of his deception is...
You did not.
That is so wrong.
The new series could easily revisit and fix many of these issues. Don't have Aang lie about the history of Jin Wei and Wei Jin, or if he does result to lying, have it backfire as a result. Have Katara call him out for lying. Most of all, maybe find a way to actually tie it into the greater narrative. Filler and downtime are important aspects of shows, and I'm not saying that they don't have their place, but even filler can loosely tie into the overarching message of the show. I should know because it's something the original typically excelled at. Even the episodes that weren't that bad, but were just a little lackluster, such as The Fortune Teller, could be improved through some rescripting, and I really hope that they use the opportunity to do that. I also really hope that they take the opportunity to better foreshadow the lion turtle from the finale. He's the one that teaches Aang spirit bending, but especially when I was a kid, it was so hard to understand what was happening and what the lion turtle was even saying. I mean, I kinda got it by the time Aang was spirit bombing Mark Hamill's bending away, but it was really confusing. By all means, keep up this air of mystery behind the lion turtle. We don't have to know literally everything about it. But if the lion turtle is going to return and give Aang the same kind of ability and advice towards the end of the whole series, it really needs to not feel like it was tacked on at the end. I've also heard some people hoping that the new series will change the ending completely, that they want Aang to decide that he has no other choice but to take Ozai down for good. Some might disagree with me on this, but I think that would be a huge mistake. The concept of choosing your own destiny, that you have a choice to be good, and to find your own way through your problems despite what everyone is telling you, is pretty integral to the story and the ending of Avatar. I can't imagine them changing that. It would also clash way too much with what we know of Aang's character. As I've said, proper characterization is incredibly important when it comes to remakes and adaptations. No matter what, he still needs to feel like Aang, and Aang would want to try to find any way to resolve his issues without resorting to killing someone. Understanding these characters is critical to the success of this show. And above all else, I think Brian and Michael understand Team Avatar. So long as these two are at the helm, I think we'll be looking forward to something special. It probably, most definitely, won't live up to the original. That's only really an issue if they're trying to replace the original. I'm remaining cautiously optimistic for this new series, and I really think that you should as well. At least until they ruin it with a trailer.
Horrible. You said it.
But the effects were decent.
Thanks so much for watching, everyone. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing to Cartoon Universe for more content just like this. Consider clicking on the bell in order to be properly notified on any future cartoon news and discussions. This is Zola, your resident Ink Mama. Until next time.